Hello, I'm Nick Kelley, the Assistant Curator here at the Camp Blanding Museum. Today we're going to talk about the U.S. Signal Corps and its schools here on Camp Blanding during World War II. In the Revolutionary War, lanterns were used to warn of approaching redcoats, one if by land, two if by sea. Colonials used letters, bugles, drums, and messengers to call soldiers to battle. Albert J. Meyer brought the Signal Corps to life as the father and its first chief signal officer. He developed a visual communication system known as the wigwag. For the Civil War, semaphores, the flags used for the wigwag system, balloons, and telegraphs were used. In the First Battle of Bull Run, Confederate Captain Edward Porter Alexander made history by transmitting the first message in combat using the wigwag system. The Battle of Gettysburg proved beyond a doubt the value of the Signal Corps on the battlefield. From 1870 to 1891, the Signal Corps operated the National Weather Service, establishing 25 weather stations between the Mississippi Valley and the Atlantic and Gulf coasts. In 1909, the Army purchased its first airplane from the Wright brothers for the Signal Corps, the origin of today's Air Force. In 1914, World War I ignited. Technology to shoot outpaced the technology to communicate. Artillery could cut communication wires, motorcycle couriers were too slow, while current radio sets were too heavy for use on the front lines. Messages were given by air, flashing lights, and couriers. World War I primarily consisted of a single theater for U.S. troops, making manpower the key answer for communications. Prior to its start, the Signal Corps consisted of less than 2,000 personnel, and it grew to greater than 60,000 by the end of World War I. By the onset of World War II, communications methods and resources had and continued to expand greatly. Here at Camp Blanding, the testing, training, and assignment of those future combat communicators would take a winding path over the 6 years. With multiple fronts and multiple theaters, needs were much greater by entrance into the Second World War. The Signal Corps grew from 27,000 strong in 1940 to around 350,000 that were providing support to all theaters around the world. Mass production and new equipment aided in the rapid and great need for expansion. It all began here at Camp Blanding with the arrival of the 1st Division. Training began with the basic infantry training for all soldiers, after which the signal companies would break off and conduct communications training with those selected and tested to meet operational needs. This occurred with the other support fields as well, while most of the division continued in advanced infantry training. This process continued while all 9 divisions and the 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment conducted their own schools to coexist with division-level training. Once all of the divisions and the 508th had moved on to follow-on stations or deployments to the European and Pacific theaters, Camp Blanding became an infantry replacement training center and established a set communications school. Predominantly shown in the foreground of this aerial photograph, with the assistance of the Camp Signal Office, shown here, which was instrumental in assisting with the communications school operations and transitioning phases throughout the war. This chimney and the foundations around here is what remains of one of the division signal schools. These buildings would have been established by the 31st Infantry Division when they got here. For their signal schools, their signal companies would have set it up and used these buildings. Some of the few remaining of any of the signal schools that was actually here. Going back to the subject of semaphores, this is an example of sending a message by holding the 2 flags in certain positions according to a set alphabetic code. This is an actual set of semaphores from World War II, consisting of the flags called wigwags, and the sticks would be held with the signal. This trainee is signaling the letter P as part of his message. Even though communications had major advancements between the First and Second World Wars, pigeons were still used frequently throughout the entirety of the war. They worked well as both supplemental and emergency means of communications. Coops like this existed on Camp Blanding for raising and training. Training of a reliable messenger pigeon took about 8 weeks from the time a bird hatched. Small tubes like the ones pictured here were strapped to the leg, and the most common use, usually color-coded to identify the correct recipients. Larger tubes that were strapped onto the back would be used to send larger or heavier message loads. Allied forces awarded the Dickin Medal to 32 pigeons, Transporting the birds to and from the battlefield, normally using smaller coops like these that held 1 or 2 pigeons at a time. These could be loaded and stacked in vehicles to create a larger coop during unit moves. However, where a commo soldier went, so would their bird. Specially made harnesses were created to keep the birds still and safe when accompanying paratroopers on airborne jumps. No matter how they got to the line, be released and performed admirably in the face of danger. The other main form of communication still used from the First World War, Morse code. Morse code is a form of assigning a combination of dots and dashes to each letter and transmitting over wire or airwave. A telegraph key, like this railroad model, is used to generate the dots and dashes and electrical charges. Here's an advertisement showing Army students in a classroom setting. They are practicing Morse code for accuracy and time. The ad was featured in the popular radio news magazine. At first, an individual person would need to connect their phone line to another person's line. In 1889, Almond Brown Stoger invented the first telephone switch and received a patent in 1891. By the time the U.S. entered World War II, Europe had a moderate telephone infrastructure in place, and with the introduction of more portable and modernized switchboards, this allowed for reliable communications over great areas. Switchboards like this could be operated in a foxhole and be centrally connected to all points along the line, allowing information to be spread quickly and quietly to all points necessary. It also had the ability to tie into the next higher command post to relay what was being seen or what was needed, and offer a quick turnaround response with directions and orders. By daisy chaining or connecting each switchboard into another switchboard along a communications line, communications could reach as far back as was needed, also allowing multiple switchboards to interconnect and share information with each other when connected to the next level switchboard. Alexander Graham Bell received the patent for the telephone in 1876. The first telephone line was finished in 1877, and at the end of 1880, the United States had more than 50,000 telephones. In 1915, a transcontinental telephone service began. The EE-8 field telephone was standardized in 1932, and procurement began in 1937, providing a lighter and more functional unit just in time for the huge mobilization of the U.S. military for World War II. Among other improvements, the EE-8 increased the maximum transmission range of the predecessor EE-5 field telephone by 6 miles or more. Communications wire was an essential piece for most communications. It was used for anything from sending Morse code, connecting telephones, to switchboards, and many other ways of keeping the forces in touch with each other. Field wire was laid by various types of wire laying devices known as reel units. Which one was used depended on the area which it was to be laid and the operational requirements. Different reel units required a varying number of personnel depending on size and deployment needs. These were known as wire laying teams. To assist in the transfer of the signal, conductor coils were added approximately every mile. To string and retrieve wire as the Army moved forward and even back, several ways were used. These linemen with tree climbing harnesses string wire in trees as they go. Attaching the wire with insulators, small eyelets usually made out of plastic or ceramic, to prevent grounding out of the signals. Although climbing is not as prevalent today, most communications wires are still run in a very similar manner. These soldiers were laying wire in the ditches along a roadway. For easy retrieval, units closer to the line would lay the wire in this manner, to make it easily retrievable in a quick and efficient manner, should the enemy push forward in order to prevent loss of compromise of the lines. Most communication soldiers were well versed in climbing, mostly trees but also poles as needed, by using gaffs, which are sharp spikes mounted on supports that would strap to the feet and ankles, along with the lineman's belt and climbing strap. Oftentimes working in pairs, they were up and down their climb, completing their work as soon as possible. Signal Corps radios, designated as SCR, were vastly different in development as the war moved along. Early models included a crank generator to power and were larger console types. Radios progressed to be able for mounting in vehicles and simultaneous use during transport. They moved along to man-pack conversions that had shoulder straps and carried similar to that of a backpack. The most influential were the handy-talkies. The handy-talkie was revolutionary, using amplified modulation, more commonly referred to as AM radio, The unit was the first handheld portable radio. The forefather of the modern walkie-talkie, these units allowed fast communications from the front lines to the support commands a few miles away without the bulk and restriction of larger units. Where did all the communications go? How were they tied together? By the message centers. Mobile in the back of large transport trucks or set up in semi-permanent or permanent command locations, all forms of communications came together to process and share information and provide order and direction of all Allied forces working together. These message centers were the heartbeat of Allied operations in all theaters. We here at the Camp Blaming Museum would like to thank you for your time and watching this video. We encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos of things inside and outside the museum. I'm Nick Kelley, the Assistant Curator here. We thank you.